I thought my daughter was the first person with a disability that I'd ever met. So because there's so much confusion and people not understanding this field, because the reality is there are so many more people that are part of the disability community, but they don't even know it. If you have had cancer, diabetes, you know, certainly somebody that has Down syndrome, or somebody that's blind, or maybe somebody that's deaf, or somebody with multiple, you know, disabilities, or but it's really, it's almost like I felt like I needed to contribute to help society as one of the voices, because I'm not the only important voice, but as one of the voices to understand, what does it really mean to be human? And to decide that my daughter's life didn't matter, which I've actually had people say, that because she has Down syndrome. I mean, I saw once a tweet that said, well, if you're carrying a baby with Down syndrome, just abort it and try again. Well, yeah, I really think that my daughter being as part of the world has added value. So, and then of course, we've been talking about, as we age, more of us acquire disabilities. It's just a natural part of life. And sadly, my husband has been one of those statistics. Whenever my husband was a young boy, before I knew him, at 11 years old, he was hit by a drunk driver, and it actually killed him on the scene, but they were able to revive him. And he was in a coma for a week and a half. He didn't go back to school for months, but he wound up surviving it, and his brain rewired, and he grew up, he got married, he had 2 children, he had a successful life, but unfortunately dementia came for his brain because he had such a bad traumatic brain injury. And so his brain is aging differently from somebody whose brain wasn't hit by a car. So I am one of the statistics that we talk about, because it doesn't mean that my husband's life doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that my husband, even though he's not in the workforce anymore, it doesn't mean that he can't contribute to the things that are important to him as a human being. But I think the reason why I am so passionate about these conversations is I just think we really need to rethink who we pity in society, who we let contribute in society, who we let be part of changing the world and making things a better place. So when I was a young woman, I was often told, oh, you're so young, go sit down, be quiet, let the adults handle things. Well, now we're seeing young people change our world. We're seeing people 14 years old, Greta, she started at 14, totally changing the world in climate action. So I think we're rethinking what it means to be human in a lot of ways right now, and my work just goes hand in hand with those efforts. I believe that what's happening right now is that we have to evolve. We have to evolve. We can't keep pretending like we don't have the problems that we have in the world. We can't keep making money at the expense of everything else. And there's nothing wrong with money. Money's a wonderful thing. It's a real tragedy is when money stops circulating in a society. And unfortunately, in my lifetime, I've seen that happen a few times, including right now in the United States, where we have so many people that have passed away from COVID-19. And the businesses are being impacted so negatively. So it's just part of being alive that we're going to go up and down. But I think we really, right now, it's a time of great disclosure. It's trying to fix what has been accidentally or maybe deliberately broken. But at the same time, I think society just has to stop believing that certain people are not as valuable as other people. And we do that with disenfranchised people. We do it with people that are poor people. We do it when people are fleeing for their lives. They're in a refugee situation and they're fleeing because somebody's trying to kill them, or because, there's a natural disaster. These people are in trouble. I don't understand why the world wouldn't work harder to want to make sure that we're protecting our planet, we're protecting human beings, and we're protecting all the other inhabitants. And so at the same time, though, and you had mentioned this a little bit before, what could we actually learn from people who have a different lived experience than you do? The reality is, whenever we are say that we're coding an artificial intelligence. Well, you have your conscious and your unconscious biases that are right in there. You do. And so the reality is, if you put a more diverse team in there, so you have there you as a male, and then you put in a woman. Maybe you put in a woman, programmer that is, brown or black and has a disability. The lived experiences that these human beings bring to their jobs are very valuable for innovation and creativeness. Once again, we want to make cities smart. We want to make communities smart. Well, you have to make sure all the stakeholders are included and the voices are heard, so that we can understand how you do that in a way. And I'll just ground that with an example. I once did a post on driverless cars, autonomous cars, and how excited I was for them coming. And of course, they are already here. And even my car that I drive today, it's not a full driverless car, but it has all these wonderful driverless features that help me be a safer driver. The car actually, in some ways, is a better driver than I am in a lot of ways. But so I have the benefit already from these technologies. But I put out a post about how excited I was for it and how beneficial it was going to be for someone like my daughter, or even someone like my husband, who now has dementia and can't drive. We didn't take his driver's license away from him. He decided he was not capable of driving, which made it easier for me. But I have peers that have to take the driver's license. What a horrible situation that is. So much is already being taken away from, for example, my husband, and now I got to do that as well. But so I posted it, and somebody came back and said, I would never drive in a driverless car because 3 people have been killed with driverless cars. And I was like, but 1 million people every single year die in automobile accidents all over the world. 1 million every single year. And yes, we don't want the driverless cars to accidentally kill 3 people. We don't want anybody dying, but technology can be a great equalizer. But sometimes people look at the wrong part of the problem, it almost seems like. So when this woman said, I would never do it, I said, okay. And I gave her the statistics and gave the information. And I did it in a non-threatening way. I don't want to fuss with people on social media, but technology is really not our enemy. But we just have to make sure technology is being used to improve everyone's lives. And that, to me, is good commerce. That is good commerce. That's a way to get more customers. This is a good thing. But the society still is a little bit too confused about profits at the expense of everybody else. And I shouldn't say all of society, but certain part of society. That's what we're fighting for today as we are voting in the United States, for example.
As an inspiring and successful entrepreneur, but as well as a thought leader, you've been doing fantastic work in all the bridges between bringing these things for actually to the world, like you mentioned, for big brands and so forth. But one of the things we are facing right now is, as we program, and as well, we are very tech savvy, and we are a global thought leadership in technology. So as we develop artificial intelligence and all the areas of these technologies, we're starting to put a lot of our bias towards this technology. Some of the things, even without people wanting. For instance, there's a lot of studies that most of the AIs are being not gender balanced. There's even more dangerous things. And as well, we are starting to have, for instance, there was an example I like to use from Professor Harari. For instance, he discovered that was gay when he was 20-somethings, and right now he's one of the biggest authors in the planet. But for a young teenager that does know about his sexuality, social media and any AI algorithm will discover that probably before they discover. So bearing in mind your knowledge and as well the complexity of these things, because this is happening as we speak and is going to be increasing. If you see fake news and everything else, independent of the politics, it was created because of this permission of technology to go in a very crazy way. So how do you see and how do you look at these things, both from an innovation perspective, but as well from an ethical perspective?
Well, it's something I'm very concerned about, and I've been talking about it a lot. I remember I was on the stage talking about this in Geneva at the International Labor Organization, because we know that we are unconsciously and sometimes consciously, deliberately building bias, programming bias right into our artificial intelligence. And I tell this story, it's a story I heard from somebody else, Sandy Carter, who's with Amazon. And it's just a little silly story, but I love how it gets to the point. And Mattel wanted to give one of their Barbies artificial intelligence. And so they took a small group of artificial intelligence programmers and they programmed this Barbie to have conversations with little girls. Specifically, it was targeted that way. And so then they had, at the event, they rolled it out in a big conference, and they had some different people lined up to talk to this Barbie. So one of the people that was going to have a conversation with the Barbie was a little girl, and the little girl started the conversation with Barbie, and it would be what you would expect a little girl and an adult conversation to begin. So Barbie says, "What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up?" And the little girl said, "I want to be a computer scientist." And Barbie said, "Have you thought about a career in fashion?" Well, the women were furious that that's what would be recommended, because little girls can be computer scientists. Little girls can work in STEM and, science, technology, mathematics. But then you dig into that a little bit more, and the programmers were a small group of all males. So if you had just a little bit of diversity, just a little bit of one of them being a woman, maybe a woman of color and a woman with disabilities, going into all the intersectionality, women would know immediately that if you said that, you would really make us furious. So you see, and that's just a small thing, but I'm an advisor with an AI and women in ethics group that Mia Dand is running. And I've gotten very involved in a lot of other efforts, because the only way to make sure we do not consciously or unconsciously build bias into artificial intelligence is to make sure that you have a diverse group of people programming it, training it, managing it, looking at it, quality assuring it, testing it. And right now, it's still mainly men that are programming. And I hear the excuses, and that's what I hear, excuses. "Oh, we can't find the women." I don't even want to hear it, because we have 100 women in AI and ethics list that Mia Dan does. So the talent is there. We just have to have the will to make sure we're doing the innovations. So if you're looking at anything that you're doing, you've got to make sure it's inclusive, or we're going to continue to make the same mistakes we've been making all along. And so I think as we move forward, the algorithms, there's different things we can do to test the algorithms out, to check it. It's about educating ourselves again, reading the books. I've really dug into a lot of the new, over the last year and a half, the artificial intelligence books that are being read. Like, I really like the one, Human 3.0, I think it's called. It was so powerful, talking about where we're going and how we can get there, but we cannot do it unless we're very, very deliberate about actually hiring people with the labels. And I love the thought of us not having to do this, us not having to say, I'm a woman, because most people can tell I'm a woman, but right now we have to be so careful with the labels, and we have to be so deliberate about making sure the groups that we're putting together to fulfill any contract are diverse. And it's still amazing to me, webinars that put out a webinar and they've only invited men to speak. It's like women are paying attention. So, but even better, for example, there is a webinar coming up that we're co-sponsoring, and it's on the intersectionality of Black Lives Matter and disability. And they said, "Will you be on the panel?" And I said, "No. Representation matters." And so we actually have people that are Black and brown on the panel, because I can speak to you from my perspective as somebody that loves people and has, that are brown and Black, but I'm not brown and black. So let's be very deliberate about representation and making sure that we're considering all of the intersectionalities so that we don't make the mistakes. But where we are right now is we have to be very deliberate about inclusion, very deliberate, and everything's being watched. So that sort of helps us make sure we're being deliberate. But even little things like making sure videos are captioned and things like that. By captioning a video, you open it up certainly for people that are hard of hearing and deaf, but it's actually beneficial to everybody. So just taking a new lens on the way we're looking at these problems and being more deliberate about inclusion and representation matters, and having different voices, younger voices, older voices, middle voices, different cultural voices, different, we just have to be very deliberate as human beings right now as we try to unravel these messes that we accidentally have gotten, or maybe deliberately, or however we got here. How do we get at it? How do we be more deliberate and make sure more people are included, so we're not building the bias and the unconscious bias into these artificial intelligence?